Chair, you are live.
Thank you. Welcome to the Thursday, September 15th meeting of the Annapolis Planning Commission. Can we have the roll call, Kimberly, please?
Mr. Pline,
Present.
Ms. Rubio Dorsey,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Svakianudis,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
Here.
Mr. Imes,
Here.
and Mr. Sale.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have 7 present.
Thank you very much. And we have full house tonight. Great. So we have roll call, and next on the agenda is our approval of minutes from the September 1st meeting. Let me share that pretty quickly. It was a short meeting, business-wise, pretty simple and concise minutes here. Approval of our minutes, adjournment, and then we had our work session on the Pearl Place project. So do we have any, can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on them? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions
Same,
or?
because I wasn't here.
Great. Okay, thanks. So at this point, that is all of our regular business, but the bulk of tonight will be a work session. So I'd like to adjourn the meeting. If I can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
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 Great. So we are adjourned, but don't go away. I don't think we've ever had a meeting that's been that short. Anyway, so we're going to have a work session. It's continued from August 18th on the Willows at Forest Drive project. And so I just want to make a few comments again about work sessions, and then I'm going to turn it over to staff to make a few introductory comments. But for those who are not familiar with work sessions, these are essentially off-the-record meetings with the developer and project team of a particular development. And this is generally prior to any application being submitted. So while materials presented and discussion that happens may, depending on the maturity of the material, they may look like an application, but these are not applications. Nothing's actually been submitted to the city in terms of an application. So we're not deciding an application in any way. This is really just a forum that we can have an honest exchange of information about the project to provide some feedback based on what we see. And nobody should take anything we say as an indication of how we might eventually vote if and when an application is submitted. So it's just an opportunity to provide some feedback based on initial plans. And often because it's not an application, it may seem overly critical, but we're just generally trying to give honest feedback. So it's just important that people understand that we're not making a decision about anything. We're just having an exchange of information. Okay, so with that preamble, we'll jump into the work session. I Tom Smith would like to also say a few words before we turn it over to the project team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarification purposes, you noted that the work session can happen prior to the submission of an application. A work session can also happen during the formal review. which is the case here. We do have a formal application for plan development here. And so we are having the continuation of a work session from a month ago. I think
Okay,
the
yeah,
commission-
thank you, if I can interrupt, thank you for
yeah.
that clarification. When I say we have not received the application as the planning commission. So
Correct. Yes, sir.
that's
Exactly.
just to put a finer point on that.
But city agencies and outside agencies are reviewing the application.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Currently, yes. So it's an opportunity for the commission, just like the city agencies, to provide input into a project at hopefully the beginning stages in a very informal setting. And I wanted to ensure that what we're discussing is, and if Julian, if you would post the checklist for me that I sent you earlier today. So this is a checklist. This is the actual the purpose of plan development out of the city code that the commission has to find along with the standards of a plan development. So I wanted to make sure that what we're talking about tonight is not about what I think or what the staff thinks is good design. It's about following the city code and trying to help the applicant get to that point where they have a project that meets the city code from an approvable standpoint. And one of the things that here in the purposes that we think could use some more work is perhaps the development that is grouping of buildings and a mix of uses in an integrated design in a coordinated physical plan way. I think we talked about this last time, a little bit of sort of segregated in its layout. So anyhow, I wanted the commission to just to get that point that this is not A design versus B design. This is trying to get an applicant to the finish line of a project that complies with the code. Thank you for posting that, Julian. If that makes sense, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I think there's been some kind of back and forth with the applicant who submitted a sketch design to us and forwarded it to the commission, and we had some thoughts and ideas and sent it back. And I wanted to make sure it's not one versus the other. It's trying to help comply with the code. Thank you for that.
Great. Thanks. And also, I forgot to mention that if anybody watching either live or after the fact has questions about anything that we talk about tonight, if you go to the Planning Commission webpage on the city website, there's a link there to provide comments, and so you can fill that form out and send comments on anything you hear in the work session in the same way that you would do if we were actually talking about an application, deciding on an application. And if you have our agendas, that link is in our agenda. So that's a way to ask questions that we will see eventually. We won't see them during this meeting, but you can ask them and to bring anything to our attention. Okay, so Tom, we ready to turn it over to the project team?
Well, before we do, we heard a lot from the applicant last time and raised several questions. And in the interim, Mr. Smith came up with sort of an alternative sketch plan, and I believe it was distributed to all of us. And before we get to the applicant, perhaps Mr. Smith could kind of walk us through what it is that he did and why he's proposing this kind of a thing, and so that we really do understand what some of the alternatives can be. Is that square, Mr. Chairman?
That's fine if Mr. Smith wants to do that, and I have that up, so I could present that if you'd like, Tom.
That's fine. I sent it to Julian as well. Whomever would like to share it and assist me, I'd be obliged.
Okay.
Yeah. Could we just show the one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't need to show all of that. I'm wondering. Okay. Still hard to see.
And make it a little smaller here. Okay. How's that?
That looks great. So the staff and department had made a number of comments to the applicant for which they had begun to address them. I think you saw last time that the applicant's project architect did a really nice job in addressing some of our architectural concerns. I think the way they chose to break some of the massing of the building and smaller elements and balconies and so forth is right where we're trying to guide them. So we certainly appreciate their efforts in the architectural portion. But what we wanted to do from a comprehensive plan perspective and as a plan development on this particular site. So the goals and the ideas here are to develop this site under any project that would be coming in at this location. We would be applying these same principles here. The comprehensive plan has talked about the extension of Skipper's Lane for probably 30 years or 25 years or so. And we started that with the adjacent Village Greens project, which isn't shown here, but it would be to the left as you're looking at this. I think most of the commission is familiar with that project, and it has commercial buildings and live work units that sit right on the street in a very urban form. And then to the right of the project, you see what's labeled VPP. That's the Village of Providence Point. That's the beginning of the cottages. And then thus the extension of Skipper's Lane all the way over to Spa Road. And again, in that project, it's fronted architecture in a very Annapolis sort of urban way. And I say Annapolis because these cottages are all designed with front porches and rear loaded garages, which is, as we know, in many sections of Annapolis, we have that and have promoted that type of design for decades, frankly. So any project that would go here on this parcel, we would want that same fronted architecture in a more urban form, pull close to the street with a sense of invitation, where Skipper's Lane is not a thoroughfare, it's a pedestrian street. It's a bike friendly street. It's a true complete street, right? It's connecting parcels together, whereas Forest Drive is the major thoroughfare. It's 7 lanes wide, which is why at the top of the page you see buffer. If you look at historically the projects that we have approved along Forest Drive and others, we've usually had a rather substantial buffer because it's 5 to 7 lanes and it's just not a friendly place. It's noisy. So we wind up providing setbacks and buffers from Forest Drive. One of the third elements in the goal we looked at is connectivity. How does this parcel relate to the adjacent American Legion, which is part of the plan development? So connectivity through the parking lot, we thought was a very important element for both uses to get from one parcel through to the other parcel. Perhaps they might even want to share spaces in the future at some point. The American Legion's having a function or the neighborhood here is having a function. Connectivity is always an important element in all projects. And then some sort of common area, central area, giving a community an identity and sense of belonging in space. I think if you look at the neighboring projects, and you can start with Village Greens next door, which has a common green in the middle, Annapolis Walk, Oxford Landing, Kingsport, they all have these common communal elements that give the neighborhood a sense of identity and purpose. So we used the same sort of preset architecture that the applicant has provided and try to arrange those structures and the parking with those goals in mind. So this is an idea that we came up with that we thought comprehensively fit better into Skipper's Drive and this area of Forest Drive. Now, granted, this is one of maybe 10 ways or 25 ways or 50 ways to solve the problem, but we wanted to lay out the parameters of what plan development and the comprehensive plan pushes you towards, so we kind of get an idea, and wanted just to be assistive to the applicant, and they can take this and modify it further and rearrange it some more, but hopefully getting those same concepts and ideas that we as a department put into this. So Commissioner Waldman, that's really how we got to this particular.
Okay. What I would like to know, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take us through, well, a couple of points. How you're addressing Skipper's Lane, how you're addressing its proximity to Village of Providence Point in the woods there. What were your thoughts about the Central Village Green? Does this provide the same amount of parking? What's the connectivity? What are the problems with connectivity to American Legion? So, I mean, can you take us, kind of show us some of the details and the thinking here?
Sure. Skipper's Lane, from its inception in Village Greens through the Village of Providence Point project, it does change its form. There are areas that have on-street parking and areas that don't. And we felt this was an area for a more urban form to provide some on-street parking, and pull building 1 and building 2 close to the street in a similar, yet looking what you have adjacent next door with the Village Providence Point. We didn't want to set these structures, which are larger, too far in front of those, but still set them close enough to the street where you could have direct sidewalk connections into the front entrances of each of these buildings. And that as a pedestrian, and I didn't show the sidewalk on here, I didn't really show all of those movements. You would feel very comfortable as a pedestrian entering any of those buildings from the street. In other words, the parking is behind you, and the urban architecture form is adjacent to Skipper's Lane. Adjacent to us, you also have this very large area of forest conservation that was approved with the Village of Providence Point project. It's almost 250 feet deep of prime forest and wetlands, and it just seems to lend itself to an opportunity of backing residential units to it from a privacy standpoint. If they have balconies, it's just a nice view. It's quiet, it's private. And then conversely, putting the front of the units on a common green space. And there's many ways to orient that green space with the parking. We simply wanted to see if we could come in off Skipper's Lane between building 1 and 2, and have your focal element, your vista, be on the green space. It could be on architecture, but not on parking, right? So you came in, you would have just a better sense of invitation into the project. From a connectivity standpoint, when you look at the American Legion, the parking lot and the parking lot behind building 2, there's a little circle with a squiggly there in the island. And that's a telephone pole, which from what I understand, it's about a 6-figure to move that. Ideally, that would make an ideal connection point right there, kind of midway. But since the telephone pole was there, we decided to put the connection at the very end of the row of parking when you come in off Forest Drive into the American Legion. It just seemed to lend itself. They already have a lane there, so we aligned the two across from each other. It's one of the safety aspects. It's just easier. So that's why we put the connectivity point there. Doesn't have to be there. That's just where we thought it lent itself to that. The common green space, I think the can be broken out into the various elements that the applicant had shown. I think they have garden plots, they have a tot lot area, they have an active play area. One of the things we have found in proposals in the past is the active play tends to be a little small. And what we like to use as a rule of thumb is it has to pass the Frisbee test. Or maybe it's the size of a tennis court. That's a big enough space where youth can have some active area that's functional for active play. And that can be arranged in many ways. And then we did show a dotted line of connection in through the buffer, because we're continuing the shared use trail that exists on Forest Drive currently. It actually ends at this property. And then with the approval of Village Providence Point, it is picked up again. So this project connects that shared use path on Forest Drive, pulls the sidewalk off of it. And if you've spent any time and looked here, you actually see people do use the shared use trail. People pushing baby joggers, riding their bikes. But when that's against Forest Drive and it's a narrow sidewalk, it's unfriendly. So we put a connection from that shared use trail into the common green space, and it can be anywhere along there. We just wanted to make sure there was a good connective element, a strong connection in a pedestrian way to that. Is that what you were looking for, Commissioner Waldman?
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I mean, I see certain advantages to this. One of them is that it's a really comprehensive green space that can be programmed in many different ways. I see all of on the two buildings to the right, half of the units in those buildings are going to be basically facing woods, and they're going to be quite desirable. I think the way that if the Skipper's Lane is handled nicely, the units that face onto Skipper's Lane are also going to be, have a desirable kind of an active feel to them. What I see in this project is that it's not dominated by the parking. I think that there, as you say, there are certain modifications that could be made, but the principles that you've enunciated and that I see expressed here, frankly, are desirable to me. It's a shame that utility pole is there, but perhaps there's another solution to that. It depends on cooperation with the American Legion. So I want to thank you for spending the time to frankly express some of what we've been trying to get done through the plan development process all of these years. And that, whether this project is for higher income or middle income or lower income people, it makes no difference to me. I think that, good design will lead to better communities, and everybody deserves good design. So thank you, sir.
One of the things I forgot to mention here is it was important from the applicant was that I think in their state submission was delineated just on those parcels that the Ingerman Company owns. And so I made sure to keep the development pieces on those parcels only, and not encroach upon the American Legion parcel. Anyhow, that's why, for example, building 2 or 1 isn't slid over further onto the American Legion site. Plus, there's some forest conservation there that we wanted to make sure we protected as well. So I just wanted to make sure you understood why it wasn't more integrated, perhaps, than it is actually.
Do you mean the forest conservation behind? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so thank you for going through that, Tom. So I see that the folks on the project team have been waiting patiently with their hand up, and I want to give them a chance to chime in based on their waiting patiently with their hand up.
Before we do that, Mr. Plant, Diane, you asked about the forest conservation.
Yeah, I wanted to understand the part you just mentioned, Tom, about the forest conservation and you were referring to the section behind the American Legion?
Yes, you see there's some forested area to the back of the American Legion. There's a large specimen tree there as well. There's a large specimen
Right.
tree in front, and we wanted to preserve as much of that as we can. Obviously, we're bringing Skipper's Lane through, so there is some forest loss. It's edge forest. Fortunately, it's not any great forest where we're losing for Skipper's Lane to come through. But again, one more design element, the more we can protect and preserve, the better. So that's again, and the parking lot for the American Legion really exists in pretty much that form that you see there.
Mhm. Great. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so you guys have a question or comment?
Mr. Chairman, Tony Christoph, I'm the attorney for the applicant. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
If I might point out to the commission, the issue before it tonight is not what Mr. Smith may have designed for the site. And as he pointed out, there could be 10 or 20 similar and or non-similar appropriate designs. I would point out to the commission that a SMPD, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, is a creature of code. And as Tom pointed out, the codes, he didn't point it out, but the code sections are primarily three: 2122-080, 2124-090, 2162-020, and the requirements of those sections were addressed in the applicant's submittal. If the commission feels that there are certain sections of the code that haven't been complied with, we would greatly appreciate it if you would point out those sections to us so that we can respond and explain our position relative to compliance. Our position is it's not either planning and zoning's or the commission's mandate to design the site for us. The question is whether the code is met in what has been submitted, and we would prefer and actually appreciate it if, rather than analyzing Mr. Smith's design, the commission dedicate its attention to our design and let us know why or why not, in the commission's opinion, those code criteria have been met.
Well, I'd just like to point out the section of the code that encourages the design to take into account the natural characteristics of the site. And in this case, as Mr. Smith was just pointing out, the forest that we would like to conserve is, goes to that issue. So it's something that's part of our code and important. And frankly, I think, we should consider that.
Yes.
Mr. Christoph, if you would like us to analyze sections of the code and go into the specifics, that might take some time. And I gather that time is of the essence here. And I would like to remind you that we have an obligation under all circumstances to see that the best design possible under the circumstances is gained. And we would like to move expeditiously towards that point. But if you'd like us to take the time to analyze and go through those sections, I'm sure that we could do that and prepare a memorandum, but it might take some time.
Well, Mr. Woolman, I take that as a veiled threat. Maybe I shouldn't, but of course, time is of the essence. Again, I'm only asking for some direction other than generalities. And I'm not asking for the commission to analyze Mr. Smith's thoughts as to what a more appropriate design might be, for reasons that the applicant can express or has expressed. There are limitations with this type of development. There are limitations with the property. It may not meet the ideal for the site, but I don't think that's relevant. What's relevant, have the code criteria been met? And if not, why haven't they been met? And what we're asking for here, I think in our second work session, other than generalities, is why haven't the code criteria in the opinion of the commission been complied with?
So should we talk about the revised
Yeah.
design?
Maybe-
Well,
maybe if you go
so on that
forward-
line, I maybe we should put Mr. Smith's an opening set of slides. I don't have that. Julian has that about planned unit developments, because bringing this in as a planned unit development is intentionally fuzzy, and that's the way that part of the code is written. And it does intentionally leave a lot of flexibility open, and that flexibility goes both ways, by the way, not just, okay, we get to do more, but it allows for something that's not perhaps explicitly enumerated in the code. And I think that's where we're having this discussion. It's not over, okay, your setback is too small, or, you know, we're having a discussion over these things that are inherently kind of fuzzy. And so, you know, I mean, you sort of open that door by coming in as a planned unit development versus, you know, something that's more by right.
It's actually a special mixed plan development, and I think that we had a work session the last time. I'm only the broker on the deal, but I do live in Annapolis, and we took in the feedback. The architect has, you know, tried to create a plan that addresses some of your comments, and we thought the purpose of this work session tonight was to be able to present the plan that we came up with as a result of the comments at the last work session. And
Yeah,
perhaps
so that's,
that would be the
yes, that's
most
fair.
productive
So
approach.
what I would like to do now is to turn it over to the project team and ask them to walk through the updated designs that they have come up with, and you know, based on the feedback that we gave in the last work session, I think that's fair to do now.
All right, well, thanks. We'll do this quickly. I'm David Holden with Ingerman. I was here last time. Terry Schuman's gonna put the revised site plan up for us to review with you. Just going around, Judy Miller is our project architect. Kara Stout is our broker. Gunny Curtis from the American Legion is with us tonight. He wasn't here at the work session we had in August. You know, Tony and Mary Ann Dillon is here again with us this evening as well. So and just I appreciate that you're aware of our time constraints here. They're around the federal and state resources that we've assembled for this project. So that's the reason for the urgency and why we're anxious to kind of keep moving through the process, and appreciate you acknowledging that and willing to work with us on that. So I think the most appropriate thing next is for Judy to kind of present what was developed after the last work session and explain kind of the reasoning behind it, and then maybe we can kind of take it from there.
Okay, thank you, David. I don't know which person had mentioned about the forest, the edge forest. Okay, Diane. The illustration that's up on the screen is not showing that part of it. I only addressed, you know, the Ingerman part of the parcel. That
I'm
is
gonna
not.
jump in. You guys aren't sharing the right screen.
Okay, sorry, hold on.
We can see your files. That's all we can see.
How about now? Do you see an illustrated plan?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Diane, to address your question about the forest, it's over here. I only dealt with what was on the Ingerman part of this parcel. So that has not been disturbed, that's still there. Tom's plan, actually, he drew both of them together so you could see it, okay? Just so you know.
And is that sliver of forest, is that considered parcel B on your plan that you're pointing to over there right now?
Yes.
Yes, it's parcel B. It's parcel B. Yes, you're correct. I'm just not.
And is that going to be protected that's being protected in perpetuity? And how much forest is that little sliver in parcel B?
It's about 3/4 of an acre, I believe.
Correct.
And the plan for that parcel is that the Legion, some of it's going to be forest conservation, and the Legion is going to have ownership of the parcel and be able to do a garden hero for veterans, a hero garden for veterans in that area, but it'll all be protected, you know, green space, not developed.
So is it going to be turned into a garden when trees taken down for that garden, or is it going to continue to be forested and saved in the forest conservation in the forest conservation plan and maintained that way. Do you
Okay,
know?
what we plan on doing is taking out all the vegetation that is not indigenous to the area. So all the weeds will come out. The trees, the live trees will stay there. Anything that's dead and does not belong in this area whatsoever will come out. And we've been talking with the University of Maryland and also an organization in DC and the mental health department here in Annapolis County to turn it into a healing garden / community vegetable garden. And that'll be a high-rise type garden beds. You know, he's shaking his head back there, throwing his hands up. Unless you actually understand what that means, you shouldn't be shaking your head back there.
Me?
No, I'm not talking about you, ma'am. It's the other.
Oh, I was just trying to
Listen.
understand how this would work, because I don't, trying to figure out if a forest and a healing garden work together, and it probably can. I've just never seen anything like it. Sounds very interesting.
Well, we do have a plan already out there. It's been a plan in development for the last 5 years. We just haven't had the property or the funding. And when I presented it to the Department of Mental Health, they were overjoyed about it.
Okay, well, now that you're presenting, why don't you walk through your sketch here?
Okay, I just want to make sure that you understood that this was only showing the Ingerman part of the parcel. It wasn't showing the American Legion, so I did not address that in the sketch. One of the comments that was addressed in our last work session was you were hoping to have a central green. And a central green would be central to the project, but due to the constraints of the site, we did look at, as Tom probably has in multiple sketches, trying to do a ring road so you could have a central green and get your housing around that. It just does not have, due to the setbacks and other issues, I don't have it to do that. So what's the next best thing? Doing a spine through the middle that has, you know, shorter runs of parking with larger islands that get you connected between the two buildings. And then coming up in, because we're trying to get green spaces throughout the property, so it wasn't one big area. As Tom had, it's beautiful, but the problem that we have with that is the practicality. So, you know, trying to lug your groceries in, you know, if you have to walk 150 feet over a green field, it's not going to stay a green field. It's going to get foot traffic marks on it. So we're trying to meld the comments of adding the green space. So we put the smaller building up here along Forest Drive, still have the buffer, and put 2 active green spaces on each side. This is a raised planter garden area. And this over here is just green space and a patio off of the community area that's on the first floor of this building. So there are less units in this building that will abut where the higher traffic area is because of the community space that's in it. And we're trying to get as much parking and respect the green space along the adjacent buildings. So the practicality of, you know, this is not a pedestrian neighborhood. As much as we'd like to have that, people have to drive to the grocery store. People have to drive to their doctors. So that's why, you know, as much as I'd like to have all the green space in the front, it's not really practical here. The buildings were pulled down to address the desire to have more architecture along the skipper's lane. I pulled them down. I think that there was a setback along here that I hit at this corner. I can't see it because the trees have been put over top of it. But that's the reason why they don't align up perfectly across their centers. I tried to address this architecture and the skipper's lane, because another comment that was brought up at the last work session was the side architecture, how that needed to have some interest, which, you know, they do have interest. We've added some glazing to the facades. We've addressed some roof line issues and do feel like we're addressing this, but this plan is really to address the residents that are going to live here, that are going to have children, that are going to, you know, even if you had this little pathway as Tom had that would cross this road, are you practically going to do that with 3 bags of groceries and 2 kids? Probably not. So that's why I do feel that this is a blend of getting a lot more green space. We reduced the parking to plus or minus 71. I still have to get handicap spaces in here. And we took the playground so it isn't up here by the road, so no little kids would run out road. So I think we really did try to address the concerns. We, as Tom had mentioned, we had met prior to last meeting, an informal meeting, and addressed some of the architectural concerns. This is where it gets fuzzy for me, because the last meeting, I don't know which person said this, but they said the architecture is fine. I don't see a problem with it, except I would probably add something to the longer roof here. So that to me is okay, leave it like it is, with the exception of the roof line on the larger building and breaking up that facade. So that's pretty much what I have. There is some parking along Skipper's Lane, not a lot, but as much as I'd love to have a new urbanist design, it's not practical for this parcel.
Yeah, so
And oh, and one more thing, I'm sorry, I apologize. One of the items that was brought up originally and how we landed with where we are is we weren't to have any access at all on Forest Drive. So we didn't. That's why we connected with Skipper's Lane. And if we do, as you know, Tom has suggested, if you have an opening on here, people will come through and you will have, and it will impact the traffic on this road. And that is contrary to what our traffic study was done. And it's contrary to what the American Legion wants to happen to their parcel and how they deal with their property. We do have a pedestrian, there's a tree showing there, but there is a walkway, a wide walkway that could connect pedestrians from one parcel to the other.
So I'm happy to jump in here and start with some feedback. And so I've talked to a number of people since our last work session, and I think I have a little bit better sense for how the comments that you as the developer have made about the green space area being segmented, and I think to a certain extent that the feedback that I've gotten validates that. So I'm happy to sort of withdraw my objections to having the chopped up green space. And so, I don't really have a problem with that either, the way it's shown there. I think, sort of a universal truth is more connectivity is better than less connectivity. And, I would like to see, and these are things that don't cost anybody anything. I think there should be some connectivity directly to that shared use path on Forest Drive, so that if somebody is, coming from either way, say they went to the Safeway on their bike, some kid went to the Safeway on his bike, coming back, he can come in that way. I think, have a connection. That doesn't cost anybody anything. And then, that with respect to the vehicular connection, there is a curb cut there into the Legion that exists. So it's not like you're adding another one. And I think the ability to come in, take a right turn in, and then go through and put the connection where you have the pedestrian path, make that a vehicular connection, doesn't take any parking spaces away, but it does provide additional connectivity. And I think always having multiple ways in and out is universally better. And it doesn't cost anybody anything. And I think, again, while the Legion might not like that 100%, that's the flexibility of being in on this partnership in a planned unit development. So,
But can I ask you a question about that, though?
sure.
This is where I get fuzzy in understanding. So yes, this curb cut is here, but if we add 58 units, it's going to impact the traffic that comes in through that curb cut. And I believe that that would be contrary to what we were originally told, that you didn't want any access here, and it would be contrary to what the traffic study indicated, that we weren't going to impact traffic because we weren't coming in off there. So I'm just concerned.
Well, I mean,
Concerned
I guess it would have to be, maybe it would have to be confirmed that it's not going to create a problem. But so I'm willing to accept that maybe that needs to be looked at. But
Okay.
We will also, between the Legion and the Willows, allow for shared parking. So that and when there's overflow or whatever, that cars can be parked on either side.
Yeah, thanks. That was the last thing that I was going to say is
I'm
that,
sorry.
is that with respect to parking, I mean, you've already in all the things we've seen, you've gone below the minimum parking requirements, and that certainly is appreciated. But I think I think any design that reduces parking from what you've asked for, maybe that's unreasonable. And and just we've made comments about minimum parking requirements recently, and if I'm going to be intellectually consistent here, what we've said, and I wrote this in our piece on our recommendation on 0922, which is restaurant minimum parking, is that restaurants and commercial entities, and I put you guys in that category. We said, what fits your business model, and we should respect what you're asking for. So I to be intellectually consistent, I have to say the same here. So I think any design that reduces parking more than you've asked for, I don't think that's consistent to say, well, you can't have it. So that's my piece on parking. But I think it would be good eventually to have something in writing with the Legion that says, sure, you can overflow park here at certain times and dates and times, however that you work that out. So anyway, that's my feedback. While while I sort of preferentially like this more new urbanist kind of design, I have to respect the feedback that I've gotten with respect to how residents who are going to live here are going to use it, and I think I'm happy to. I'm actually agreeing with you personally that I don't think it really works in this context, as much as I might like that. But that's we have to respect how other people who are going to live here will want to use it. So that's my feedback. Anybody else want to jump in? I see Mr. Laplace has his hand up, but did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. Just a couple thoughts. I think staff had some really good ideas. It's difficult to change the concept on such a small site. And I think based on what we're looking at tonight, the plan before us, I think we can make this work. I think this is workable from an urban design standpoint. Some of the things I like about it is that there's a separation of the vehicular and pedestrian access. And even though it'd be nice to have the pedestrian experience more in the center of the lot, maybe we can make that periphery more flowing and connected and, and more attractive. It sort of seems to be evolving. I like the fact that there's a building presence to sort of build that street wall that we talk about with Forest Drive becoming more of an urban boulevard in the future. I like the fact that the two buildings, the ends are on Skipper's Lane. That could be a really nice entrance feature with the drive in between them. But I think this isn't a bad urban form if we really finesse it. I think it's almost like traditional early 20th century developments like Radburn in northern New Jersey and stuff, where you had the separation of the automobile and the pedestrian. I think we could work with this. So I think we can go in a good direction with this if this is the concept we move forward with.
Well, Mr. LaPlace,
I also wanted to mention that I like the fact that the green spaces around the periphery where the rest of the city can enjoy it as much as the residents. I think that's a very gracious aspect of this design, that as you're on Forest Drive, you see green. From the adjoining properties, you see green. Even from Skipper's Lane, there's greenery. So I think those are some positives I wanted to mention.
Okay, so let's let other commissioners have any comments.
well, if nobody else will jump in, I'll jump in. And I have great respect for some of the people who've spoken, and it don't take it personally if I disagree with some things. But I think it would be hard to work with this property. I see when it's talked about a spine, what I see is a parking lot. Whereas when I look at the proposed alternative, I don't see a parking lot. I see a green space in the middle. I see the focus of this community is itself rather than its parking lots. And I also don't see that it's using Skipper Lane in the way that you want to make it into an active boulevard. I mean, you've got the end units, the end walls of those two buildings facing Skipper Lane and not bringing them, onto the boulevard. I'm not saying onto it, but I'm saying that if you turn or put the smaller building down on Skipper Lane and face it, you're creating an active environment on Skipper Lane, but that's not what this thing shows. This thing shows basically two end units and a contained place that doesn't really connect. It doesn't show that it's connecting with things. So let me kind of start with what my thoughts as they were a little more rationally and coherently. If we analyze just that section of the code that was displayed to us, we're obligated under planned developments to come up with quality design. And quality design means that we approve places that are going to build community and not just places to live. And that we should counteract the negative effects of monotonous design. Well, this looks to me, as Mr. LaPlace said, like a lot of places elsewhere. And it does not show that it's learned from what we've learned by mistakes over the past 30 years. It just shows the same old thing with a parking lot in the middle. And does it integrate the open spaces? No, it pushes them all to the side. So here's a couple of specific thoughts. I'm not crazy about what's shown here. I don't think that it's showing anything that's really a really creative answer to the problems. And I'm not at all convinced that people cannot walk 100 to 125 feet carrying groceries with two kids. As a result of the work session last time, I've been sort of driving around town and looking at various residential developments and looking at where the parking is. In many cases, parking is not necessarily in front of the front door. It's often quite separated from buildings. What is that sound in the background? So
If folks can mute if you're not talking, that would help.
What is it?
Yeah, it's your echo, actually, I think, through Mr. Schumann's room there. Yeah.
All right. So I'm not convinced that people, are not going to walk a certain distance, that they have to have parking right next to their. In fact, the person who's in the furthest reaches of that upper T on the right or the left, they have a pretty far distance to go, and they have to dodge cars getting in and out. So I'm not convinced that your design here solves the problem. Your argument is that people don't want to walk. Well, you know what? It's not very far to walk to the Safeway. It's not very far to walk to the CVS. Now, if you think that people can't walk, well, I don't know, there's not much hope for America. But here's a couple of specifics. The healing garden plans should become a part of this plan development. They should be on the plat. They should be written and they should be a part of it. This is a planned development of 2 parcels. And this developer has gotten the density that he wants on this small 2.5 acre parcel, or whatever it is, by incorporating the American Legion. But there's nothing that's been gained, nothing that the American Legion is really giving up on this. So if you want to be a planned development, then you have to engage in flexible design and you have to engage in the standards and goals that are inherent in planned developments. Counteracting the negative effects of monotonous design, coming up with quality design. All right, first, healing garden. 2, I think that the access between this property and the American Legion, vehicular access, is supremely important. There's going to be overflow, there's going to be bleeding. You guys need to look at, when does the American Legion use all of its parking and when does it not? And you need to come up with a plan. And it needs to be written and it needs to be a part of the application and the plat. All right, I already talked about Skipper's Lane and how I don't feel like this thing adds anything to what we've been trying to do on Skipper's Lane, running from the absolute forested part over at Spa, coming into crossing Village of Providence Point, fairly, densely developed in the center, and then the cottages, and then, this would be more dense and more active, and it keeps moving towards the shopping center and becomes more and more active. And we want to make it a comfortable boulevard to walk on, to park, to drive on, and to ride a bicycle. And I think that the architect got it wrong when she said, I don't think that people are going to walk down Forest Drive with 3 bags and 2 kids. No, I don't think they're going to walk down Forest Drive. I think they're going to walk down Skipper's Lane. And so we need to do everything we can possibly do to make Skipper's Lane really cool, really good. And I don't think that all this does is say parking lot. When you pass that access point, what you look into is parking lots, cars. All right, let me keep going. I don't see that there's an adequate buffer up on Forest Drive. I mean, a bunch of street trees is not an adequate buffer. So there needs to be a hell of a lot more detail placed on that. I mean, the whole project may move down 15 or 25 feet. And start to really get close to Skipper's Lane. The whole thing could move down. And in which case your access through to American Legion on the left, maybe who knows where it's going to be. But you need to play around with those places. The shared, I think I already mentioned that the shared parking agreement needs to be written. It can't just be on the fly. Oh, they're going to be okay with it, because they're not going to be okay with it unless there's an agreement. And I don't know what the American Legion is getting out of this, but they're part of it. And so make this project work so that everybody here can have 2 cars to their name and associated with each residence. We're going to have extra parking. And in terms of intellectual consistency, here's one of the things that gets me. You have separated the common spaces, or these green spaces, into, well, at least here, 3 different uses. 3 different generations. And what we've been trying to do, every place else that we go, we've been trying to provide green spaces where 3 generations can actually participate. City Dock is a great example. Grandparents, parents, children, something for everybody, something for teenagers, something for middle-aged people. We need, the most popular place in senior citizen residences is at the entranceways, where they watch what people do. And all over Europe, there are old people watching kids in playgrounds or having some benches off to the side for themselves. So I'm not convinced also that the separation of generations is any kind of a good idea. All you've done is separate the green spaces. And whereas if you had a common green space, you could really program it so that it becomes a real community center, a heartbeat. A place where people from all 3 buildings meet The other thing is that in the Smith proposal, you have the occupants of 2 buildings facing the forests of at Providence Point. And here you only have the residents of 1 building. Now they got some street trees around. Yeah, I understand. But there's nothing like real greenery. There's nothing like being able to use it. So maybe moving the building to the right, bringing building number, I can't even see the number. I don't know, the one that's along Forest Drive. I don't know, swinging it around, doing something here so that the focus of the community is not the parking lot. I've said enough and I'll say no more.
Who else wants to chime in?
I will. I like the redesign, and I think they've addressed a lot of the issues. All due respect to Bob, you said extra parking, and I think we as a commission have said, essentially that we're trying to do away with parking requirements. I think we, a lot of times we say, would we want to live there? Well, I think, it's a place where I would want to live. But I think the biggest issue here is we need affordable housing in the area. And we don't want to be, make this cost prohibitive and impractical. I agree with, when you go shopping, when you come home with groceries and you have young kids, you don't want to trek across a field and walk a little extra. I think you should be, I like the way the design is that you can park right in front of your door and take the groceries up. So, I guess I just want to say I like it. I think we need affordable housing, and that's it.
I'll chime in if that's okay.
Yeah.
I agree we need affordable housing, but I just think we have an opportunity here to really make it nice, really nice. And not that this isn't nice, but some of the points that Bob just made, and I think that the planning department staff has thought about, really makes it better. Dividing up the green space into these little sections really isn't a great idea. I do like the idea of a common area where people will come together, and I think that this design doesn't do that. I also think a really good buffer against Crazy Forest Drive is important, and I don't think this buffer does it as shown. And maybe there is a way to work on it. I mean, I guess what I like about this is the little patio off of building number 1, and that active green space is fabulous. I just wish it was in the front of the building, or I guess that would be the back of the building, depending on your perspective. Trying again to get those green spaces closer together. Yeah, I just feel like there's still a way to do it. I feel like this is a great effort, and I feel like there's some benefits. But yeah, I was thinking about the distance to the shopping, and I agree that people are going to use Skipper's Lane, and I see more and more people walking and biking than ever. And I think if we're going to promote multimodal opportunities for people, we want to concentrate, as Bob was just saying, on making Skipper's Lane more comfortable for people and making it someplace people do want to walk to the store, whether it's Safeway or what have you, down in the Village Greens area. People will walk if you make it desirable. So I think this is a good effort. I think there's a little ways to go. I think we can definitely make some of this happen. I don't think we jeopardize having affordable housing by trying to make it better, unless I've missed something.
What's undesirable about Skipper's Lane? Other than the placement of the home, Bob said he doesn't like the end units on Skipper's Lane.
Right. You would want the biggest, to activate that lane, having more building there and less parking lot. So you have two ends of a building facing Skipper's Lane instead of the side of the, like a full edge front or back of a building there.
And you think that affects people walking and using Skipper's Lane?
I
to go
do.
to Safeway?
Yeah.
Just for what it's worth, the distance from, say, the center of that parking lot, the center of mass of the three buildings to Safeway is a half mile. That's a pretty far walk. I mean, it's a walk shed typically is going to be a quarter mile, maybe a third of a mile. And that's half miles,
Okay.
you got to really want to do that. Just FYI.
Okay.
Chairman Klein, I think the Alderman wants to speak, so maybe.
Okay, well, I wanted to give the commissioners the chance to give some feedback here, and then we'll let Alderman Gay.
Let me just reply to Tom. Yes, affordable housing is very important for Annapolis. It's very important. And in no way should my comments be taken as any kind of criticism or obstruction or restriction of affordable housing. All I'm trying to say is that, and this is personal, it's aesthetic, I get that, is that good design is everybody's right. And I think that we really need to press to get the best possible design that we possibly can here. And that's enough.
I agree with you, but I also think that not at the cost of practicality for the people that live there.
Okay, well, but what aspects of this, of Tom Smith's proposal, the sketch here, can be incorporated into this to make it really better? Will the applicant really collaborate and cooperate on this to see that some of these things can really be made better? And by moving some pieces around so that we don't have a parking lot, which is the primary focus of life here. I mean, okay.
I mean, I'm gonna chime in on that, in terms of better, that is quite subjective. And I think if you were to ask somebody who lived here, whether the aspects that you brought up versus a shorter walk to my front door with groceries, ask them what their priority is.
Okay, well, look.
So, I mean, let's
put
all
up
have our
can we
views.
put up Smith's proposal for a second? Put up Smith's proposal.
No, I don't want to do that right now. Let's,
All right,
let's
okay. Because I could show you how to do it.
well, let's, so Teresa, do you have any comments? I want to make sure that everybody's had their.
For sure. And yeah, and then the last discussion that we talked about this as well. I think I shared some of Bob's sentiments, just as, I just felt it was very, hope's the term I use. I think it was very parochial. It's just very, the center focus on the parking lot obviously is an issue, right? But I have a question really about just the access to the American Legion. We had talked about, there was discussion about overflow parking, or at least use of that parking lot. But am I to assume that any access to that parking lot would then be through Skipper's Lane and not through the actual parcel?
Yeah, I think the way it's proposed, that's true.
Okay, so it's more of an extra type of thing. Yeah, I mean, at this point, like I said, most of our issues or concerns in the last discussion was strictly about the placement of the buildings, the aesthetics, and overall focus on the parking lot as the central main vein of this design. I think the addition of the trees and other types of depictions here are nice, but I think I'm in agreement with Bob on some of these issues that those haven't been addressed. And I do believe that it's subjective. It is, right? And it's a matter of feasibility and whatnot. So I think, at this point, it's like what's done is done. Here's where it is. And if it's not feasible, it's not feasible. But I think to Bob's point is that if it is feasible, is there consideration for those things, or are those strictly non-starters? So that's mine. So I think I'd like to hear more from the project team as far as, what their limitations are, or at least what the ask is for next steps, so we can help move forward.
Okay, thanks for that. So let me give an Alderman Gay a.
Well, I'd like to say something if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm sorry, David. Sorry.
Dave.
and Ben also, if you.
And yeah, we have Ben as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You guys have been so quiet.
Well, it's just we came out with a lot of at first I didn't want to say anything because it was really confrontational at first. You know, we've come out of both these meetings. They started with us kind of being bullied into doing something really quickly. But what I have to say is, and I'm glad that it got a lot more respectful as we went through with the architect. But what I'd like to say about this is I agree with a lot of what Bob says, especially the three areas of green space, the garden, the patio, and the playground. I would think there'd be shuffling things around. There should be some way to combine two of those together, at least, like the patio and the playground. And maybe it's just moving the parking lot space, you know, different area. But and I do think there's not enough buffer at the top on Forest Drive as well, by what I see in this picture. I think we just have to be careful not to be just checking off boxes that says it adheres to this, it adheres to this, it adheres to this. And really, a good site design is everyone's right, as Bob says, if it's feasible. Now, of course, we're still in just the work session here. This isn't even the public hearing yet. So we've got a lot to hear from a lot of other people. But I just want to say, I just don't think we need to be rushing to say, you know, of course, anything we say in this work session should not be construed as something that says, you know, an indication of where we're leaning towards, or to give people like a false hope. Like if we didn't say we didn't like something, doesn't mean we're going to like it later. So, you know, just keep that in mind, that it's just, I think this is a lot better, but in my opinion, it's not perfect yet. That's it.
I'll save a lot of minutes here and make mine 30 seconds or less. I decided I would talk last to hear what everybody else had to say, and it's a great benefit because I agree with a lot of what Alex and Bob Waldman said. Bob, don't back down. This development is going to probably house over 200 people and got more disconnected. And to say people shouldn't or don't want to walk onto Forest Drive when that would be the primary way you'd go get to the Pitt Moyer Rec Center, or even up into the city, that doesn't make much sense. And also the public buses are going to be running right there. So of course you're going to want to get up there, get places quick, and you should be able to cross that. I understand traffic's going to be affected, but at some point in the city, if we want to get more urban, we want to make more workforce housing, want to make things happen, traffic's going to be developed. Traffic's going to get worse. That's a part of it. It can get better in some respects, but in a lot of respects, it's going to have to slow down a little bit so that people can make their way. So without any further ado, let's go on and hear other comments. I agree with you, Bob.
Okay, I'm not missing anybody now, right?
No.
Okay, good. So Alderman Gay, I'll turn the floor over to you if you want to make some comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'll be, quick. I appreciate the time to speak and I've enjoyed the dialogue so far. I will say I out of the gates, I do agree with Chairman Waldman as it relates to the recreational and green space, on the facility. I'm not a fan of, and obviously I have no sway in this at this point. So please take my comments as you wish, but I'm not really a fan of the parking lot as it's structured. I grew up in low income subsidized neighborhoods. And to me, this looks like the perfect parking lot for throw up tackle and for some kid to get hit by a car. If you don't know what throw up tackle is, that's when we're all out playing football, throwing up the ball. It's just, there should be more green space. The first thing I pulled up was chapter 2220 in the city code as it relates to review criteria and certification for adequate recreational facilities. And I'm wondering if it meets that standard or if the fee in lieu is being applied to this project. I agree. I think the two commenters before me mentioned moving around the patio, maybe to adjoin the the playground area. I just think that would make more common sense, in particular if you're having some sort of an event near the patio or a cookout, etc. It's right next to the playground and there's easy access there. I also did not see, and I'm not sure if this will come at a later date, but maybe plans for the buildings to be energy efficient, solar panels, etc. Just providing that opportunity. And I was also concerned with maybe adding a fence. I could not see again because of the trees, etc. just along Forest Drive. But my general feeling of this project is I think we need to get it done. I'm worried because there is a timeline, and, you know, the federal government is not going to wait for us to decide what we want to do with the playground. And particularly as it relates to funding, they'll move on. And so, but just in general, I guess the recreational, it has to be fixed. The recreational piece has to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Gay. And I mentioned that in our last working session with this, and that little playground got made there, but that only addresses one little age group. And just like you say, you're teenager and above, you know, above 10 years old, what are you going to do? You know, you hear, yeah, you could walk over to the middle school playground area or to Pitmore Rec Center, but it's quite a ways away. So it's just a shame we don't have more recreational facilities south of Forest Drive in that big neighborhood area there. It's almost like somewhat of a ghost town for recreational facilities. If there ever was a place for the city to build a bigger gym and another gym, that would be the first place I would go. But thank you, Mr. Gay. I really appreciate you bringing that subject up.
You know, one of the thoughts I had is stripe part of the parking lot is a basketball court, and cordon it off when people aren't parking there. Maybe a non sequitur at this point.
Do we have to have 58 units in 3 big buildings? Can it be, you know, a little less, but you get more for the people? Those are all things I'm thinking, you know.
Well, I mean, yeah. So anyway, at this point, does the project team have more to say? And I think we've.
Yes.
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 I'm sorry, I was trying to find the button.
Yeah, I think just on the recreation part, to answer Mr. Alderman Gay's comment, we do, you know, Rec and Parks did review this project. They have given an approval on this, so we do meet it with our recreation and also the off-site proximity to Annapolis Walk Park. So we do meet all the requirements of the APF certification on the Rec and Parks or recreation. So.
And I wanted to add, I am listening truly to what you're saying. And it is difficult because we have, you know, very far this way, very far that way. So what I've been trying to do throughout this entire process is find that middle ground. So I'm never going to make everybody 100% happy. But one of the things you were just talking about, I'm going to try like heck to draw on this. I don't know if it's going to work. Can you see the mouse?
Yep.
Okay. So what your concern was, you're seeing this parking lot. I have a large island here, but if I make this island larger, and forgive my mouse drawing because this is not great, but if I make this island larger, push this building a little further this way, it gives you more buffer. You can draw trees, there we go. Gives you some more buffer there. And then on axis to this, you're seeing less parking and you're seeing more green and a very nice piece of architecture. I would contest that it's monotonous and not creative, but tongue in cheek there. Over here, I could push these down a smidgen and try to get them a little more close, but we did address previously, so this architecture doesn't look the side of the building. It is attractive. There are porches on it. It's pretty. It's a nice end of a building. And it is appropriately scaled to be along this size of frontage. So in doing that, you know, whether this playground's here or this garden's here, it doesn't really matter. What I was trying to do with this is get a nice axial view and have things relate to each other in more of a formal sense. And so if I push this down, I get a little more green space here. If you want the playground over here, we put the playground over here. You have to try to blur your eyes and say, where is there green? And if that green can, you know, if we want to put the playground over here by the patio, we can do that. I deliberately moved it over here because I didn't want it as close to the road. Because I don't know, you know, I don't want that close to traffic and plus noise. You know, trying to let the little kids play. Maybe they're noisy and they need to be by the road. But there are 1,000 ways to do the same thing. And this is just listening to you tonight. I'm not going to make anybody happy because I can't get your central green and deal with the practicality of how people realistically will be using their vehicles, you know. So we're going to have, pedestrian access here and pulling that forward, I think that addresses some of the concerns. It's obviously not all. Oh, and yes, you mentioned something about, the Alderman mentioned about energy efficient. These are LEED Gold buildings. We are committed to that. The program that we have for funding requires us to, it's competitive. So we had to do more. And in doing more, we're going to certify these buildings LEED Gold. Most market rate communities aren't doing that. And as you said, you grew up in housing in the city, so did I. And I don't think that this is anything close to what you would be offended by. I don't think that it's monotonous. It's really doing the best we can with the parcel of land that we have. And I do think it would be a good addition to the community. And there's nothing keeping people from walking along here. I just thought that it was not a good idea to bring the traffic in here, especially after the comments that we shouldn't, and for good reason. And there's nothing keeping this boulevard from being a boulevard. I'm sorry if it offends anyone. That's never my intent. But I am trying to satisfy multiple masters here, and just I'm struggling with it. So I'm doing the best I can, given the constraints.
Yeah, I have one further comment about that connection to the Legion parking lot that you just mentioned. I think one compromise there would be to have a vehicular connection in the sense of, a contiguous road and not a sidewalk or something, but to put a bollard in there because that is potentially removable. So if there's ever any reason that public safety official might want to remove it, they could do that. I think of it as the Victor Parkway analogy. So if there's it truly is going to be a traffic problem to let, as a matter of course, vehicles enter the parking lot through the curb cut at the Legion. At least put the roadway connection there, but put a bollard there, because it does provide you some flexibility down the road, and frankly, it doesn't cost anybody anything, but gives you flexibility down the road.
I have a question about this. Why are we continuing the access to Forest Drive into the American Legion when they're going to get access off of Skipper's Lane? What if that were closed off?
Because they want that.
It's a fire.
I mean, that would comply with our requirements in the code to deal with transportation in a more coordinated. What's going on? There's nobody listening.
Emergency service wants to.
Am I talking into other people's conversations?
No, we're answering your question.
Emergency services wants that access for one thing.
Emergency services does?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to see, I'd like to hear from them on that, because that's causing a lot of problems, that access to Forest Drive.
Well, on the one hand, we're hearing it's causing problems, and on the other hand, you're telling us you want us to increase the traffic potential through the site. And to address Alex's comment about having a bowler there, that's, if people come in through Forest Drive to the American Legion because of some accident or whatever other means he was proposing, there's nothing that precludes them from entering through the Legion parking lot, going out to Skipper's Lane, and then turning left and then right into their parking lot. So, it's.
Okay, one of the things you need to deal with is the shared parking. And how do you make that work? And where is the shared parking going to be on the American Legion lot? Maybe there's not a vehicular access between the two parcels, but maybe there's several pedestrian access. I can't tell you that.
Yes, we have pedestrian access, and they're going to work on a shared parking arrangement. That's something that we can have a written plan. We can have a written plan. That's not a problem.
I'd like to see what the fire department has to say about that Forest Drive. And if that's what they have to say, that's what they have to say. I can live with it. Okay, enough.
Just to add too, where you see the patio, in the building on the first floor, that patio opens up to the community room that's there for the residents. Yeah, where the cursor is sort of circle, and there's a fitness center in there with some weight equipment and some cardio equipment, and then there's offices for the property staff. So that for whole first floor of that building is common area community space.
Why isn't your business incubator in all of your offices down towards Skipper Lane?
Because you asked us to move it up here. You asked us
I didn't
to,
ask you.
maybe
didn't ask you
you,
to
maybe
do anything.
you didn't particularly, but you
I didn't
asked
ask you
for,
to do anything.
Not you
okay,
specifically.
that's what I'm saying, not you specifically, I'm sorry. What
Well,
I'm saying is, we had the smaller building down here. The last meeting, it was requested to have less building or pull the buildings totally off of here. And realistically, I cannot do that. Okay, so what is very nice about having the community space on the first floor of this building is it's on axis, so it gives the eyes on the street, the leasing office. They see everybody that comes into the community, and you have this nice green space on axis. When you look up this, it's no different than looking up the street. If you'd like, we could try to get a large walkway across here. I could split this up and put more islands. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to do the same thing.
well, you have heard a lot, okay? You have time before you come to us with a formal application.
One last thing before we go back to Alderman Gay. How many people do you guess are going to live in this complex?
Mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments.
Yeah, I know that. How many, what's the number on your guesstimate though?
Yeah,
I guess over 200, easy.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be that many. I think, and I'd like to get back to you on that because I don't want to guess and
Okay.
guess wrong.
I got you, to be
But
fair.
it's probably my, so anyway, so if I could just get back to you, I will.
No problem, but I'm guessing 58 units, 1, 2, and 3, average 3 per unit. I'm talking over, in some 4, talking almost 200 or more people.
No,
And we keep cramming people in developments. This looks like almost Robin, a Newtown 20 to me from the space, from looking from the top view down. I mean, that's just a lot of people, man. Can't we give people more space, more room? Or are we limited by the federal money that you're getting? What's making us cram all these people into a small piece of paper?
yeah, well, the 1 bedroom units won't have 4 people in them though.
I know that. I'm just saying on average, though, 3
Yeah,
people, we get
one or
1, 2, or
two.
3 bedrooms. Average 3 people overall. In 58, get about 160 plus, 170 plus, 200 people. But what's making us have to do 58 units?
That was what the application was for, Ben, and that's required. It's a very competitive process and you have to deliver what you were funded for. And 58 units is the density that was funded. It's the density that works from a management scale. And at this point, there's no change in the density count because this is what was funded.
Gotcha. And so, but in order to make that density work with this application, it's almost like we're getting around the law by using other adjoining properties that these people won't be able to use to make it seem like it's not so dense by the law. That's just the way I kind of view it. And I hate to say that, but it's a lot of people in a small space and it just doesn't seem a cool thing for me to do. But all right, let's keep on going.
Well, you can say that, but I think you should look at the code. The special mixed plan development is designed to have the residences per a certain land acreage. And we're not even at the maximum density that will be allowed for the whole site. But you're acting as if this isn't you doing any benefit. We're taking a corner from Newtown Drive to what appears to be the beloved Providence Point project that we've heard so much about tonight. And
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. I don't want to belabor the meeting any longer.
That
So great
activates
benefit.
that entire area. We had to connect with the Legion because we were told we had to access across the Legion's property. So, I mean, it made sense and to connect and work together on a unified plan. And the Legion, you know, is being a good neighbor and they are benefiting by having access to some of that adjacent parcel where they can have a small area that won't be forest conservation, where they can have their garden plan.
Done my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Alderman Gay, you have another comment?
Yeah, I just had 2 quick questions. the backside of Forest Drive, is that fenced or no? And when I say fence, not all the way across, fence with pedestrian access.
We didn't put fences because we want trees, because the fences, yeah. So somebody needs to talk to that company.
Yeah, we weren't fencing along Forest Drive. We were putting a landscaping buffer there.
Okay, I'm assuming that it'll be a very thick landscape buffer. I just can't, obviously, yeah, it'll look better in person, I'm assuming. And also as it relates to the, the parking and the recreational space, obviously the council is working on 4022 right now, which for a project like this would, it will, if passed, would remove parking requirements for affordable housing projects. The right-hand side in front of the raised garden plots, I'm I don't want to speak out of terms here, but I'm wondering the committees or the commissions feel on, removing some of the parking. Obviously, I know that there is, code requirements, but to extend the green space, is that a possibility or what are some thoughts on that? I'm just thinking in regards to, as mentioned, extending as much recreational space or outdoor space as possible.
I think we covered some of that earlier, Juwan, and some of the parking, they have reduced it from the code requirements per the request of the city and the planning commission, and the parking that is on the project now is really what is believed to be necessary for the units, for the residents.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of where we need to be. We can look at it if there's any give, and especially along the lines of what Judy sketched and showing the building one coming down towards Skipper Lane a little bit and creating some green space there, eliminating parking. But we're getting tight as far as functionality for parking, and we are below the requirement. And we've reduced it since the original discussions.
Yeah, and I'm not getting political here at all, but my feel with the parking requirements with affordable housing is that they're pointless because, most of the residents will rely on some form of public transportation, right? Or at least that's how it is in Ward 6, where, I represent nearly 80% of the subsidized housing communities in the city. Most of our residents rely on public transportation. And so, I'll leave it at that, but I appreciate the time to speak. So sorry.
No, take your time, Alderman Gay. You are the absolute expert on this for a living there.
What are you trying to say?
I have a question for Terry Schuman. Is Annapolis Walk a public park space?
Yes. It's off of,
okay, so that's
Bywater.
part of the.
Yeah.
Right. I was just wondering what the parks that you use for the APF were,
Yes,
and I'm glad to know that Annapolis Walk is public, because we obviously don't want to count private park space to get our APF correct for parks and which was, is it like 500 square feet per unit, I think?
Correct. That is correct.
And Diane,
so you got to do that.
Diane, the Annapolis Walk Park, is that the one that's behind the Safeway?
Yeah, it's down Bywater.
It's past Bywater, and it's what was going to be the relief road between Bywater and Kingsport. Is that the park you're talking about?
I think so.
Okay, so that's past the Safeway, past the half mile that Alex measured?
I'm looking at it here, and it's a little less than a half a mile. And if you remember from our review of the CIP, that was one of the places that's going to get some serious attention based on the current CIP or proposed CIP.
It's pretty far to go play a game of basketball. Okay.
You know how many people are already going to be using that? There's a ton of housing around it.
Oh, I mean, that that's, the code is the code. We, if it meets the code
Right,
in
it's
that
also-
regard, that,
Mhm.
nothing we can do about that. Okay, so where are we? Anybody else have further questions or comments, or have we come to a natural place to go back and do some more homework?
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I guess our question is, given the urgency of moving this forward from the funding point of view, what does the commission think would be the steps that should be taken so that we can get to a public hearing? Again, hopefully in October at the latest. It'll be in October.
Well, you have all of these changes that you've promised to make.
Yeah, I mean, if you could take this feedback and
if
perhaps,
you
get another, a cleaned up version with some of these things that you sort of hand sketched here, and
right.
We need to look at that again.
If we do that as part of the public hearing process, would the commission be satisfied with that? In other words, can we get on the October agenda for the public hearing?
I'm just going to point of order. I just want to make sure, as far as the process of putting in the application, that's outside of our hands. When the applicant is prepared and ready to submit the application, the commission is prepared to hear it. I think that's kind of the point, right? But as the commission members, we're not the ones that set the schedule. That would have to go through the proper process.
The
Yeah,
application.
I would
was
ask,
submitted-
I would ask Tom Smith to chime in here, because I'm fairly new at this, and I don't want to speak out of turn on the
Sure.
process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To date, we do not have a project that meets adequate public facilities in the city. These revisions would have to be resubmitted to the city, re-reviewed by those city agencies to ensure that they meet adequate public facilities, that certificate issued before we could have a public hearing before the Planning Commission. And that's going to take several months.
Several months.
Tom, can you clarify, from looking at E-Track, it appears that the only denial of adequate public facilities was by the police department. And we're working on, Gunny met with them about them addressing like they've done in some of these other applications, including Providence Point and Parole Place, where they don't meet the threshold either, but the police has accepted some mitigation efforts. And so, and they obviously.
And I didn't say denial, I said garner approval from.
Right.
So yes, you must work with the police department to get a mitigation agreement as part of your adequate public facilities, but you still don't have APF from planning and zoning and from public works and from fire.
No, no.
No plan is on.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so, those things, as we say, are above my pay grade, so.
Yeah, and my only, and let me try to really, my only point was that the working sessions are in no way an indication or an expedition of an application. I want to make that very clear. These are working sessions that are requested by the applicant to review and discuss and get input, feedback, and so on, but they are in no way an accelerated path to approval.
I didn't know that the applicant could request the work session. This application was submitted back in April, and, unfortunately, we couldn't get to a work session until August. Because the code says the applicant can't reach out to planning commission. So there's a lot of
through
gray
Tom
areas.
Smith, and it's through Tom Smith and that, meaning that the commission is not the one that decides when a working session, it comes through the whole process.
Correct.
We
You work
have
through
no
the staff
idea-
and they bring
we
it
have
to
no
us.
idea what happened between April, May, June, July, August. We have
Exactly. No idea.
I have no idea what happened. All we know is that this came to us as a work session. And I don't know what the scheduling was. I know we were done with Providence Point in February.
Well, does that answer the question?
I'm not sure.
So
Anyway, so at this point, in terms of application process, you guys as the project team need to work with staff. That's not our purview. So we don't have to talk about that anymore, but work with staff to work out what your timeline and process is to submit your formal application, that then it can get scheduled with us with a public hearing. And as soon as that happens and staff says we're ready for public hearing, we will get that on our public hearing calendar when that's ASAP, when that's ready.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so in terms of any other questions or comments on the things we've talked about here, any final thoughts or words from either the project team or any of the commissioners?
No, thanks for your time. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Waldman.
I've said enough. I've made myself clear.
Yeah, I just
I
want to
would
say
like to
thanks for
see
your
these
time.
things, I'd like to see these things moved around in a way that doesn't leave a parking lot as the central monument to this project.
Okay, well.
Well, I thank you guys for
Thank you.
again entertaining a dialogue with us.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask one really quick question. I'm so sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
To the applicants, you mentioned October as a deadline and what you, or something around October. And I just want to get clarification on that from myself and from my colleagues.
We mentioned that we wanted to have the public hearing in October with the planning commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming and having this work session. And I think, these are always helpful for both sides. So thanks, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
at this point, I will informally adjourn our work session and thank you all. And